I died on my 35th birthday, alone in a studio apartment in Toronto with $17 in my bank account and a citizenship I'd spent 3 years fighting to reclaim. The irony wasn't lost on me even as my vision faded. That after everything Svetlana had taken from me, I'd end up dying in the country I'd been born in, the one I'd foolishly abandoned for her. But death, as it turned out, wasn't the end. I woke up gasping on a plane, my hands gripping armrests I recognized instantly. Flight 237 from Toronto to New York. I knew this plane. I knew the stain on the seat in front of me, the crack in the window shade. I knew that in exactly 4 minutes, the flight attendant would come by offering drinks, and I'd order a ginger ale I wouldn't finish. I knew because I'd lived this day before. The date on my phone confirmed it. 5 years earlier. 2 months before I'd make the biggest mistake of my life. 2 months before I'd renounce my American citizenship for a woman who'd throw me away the moment she got what she wanted. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage that felt volcanic. 5 years of accumulated fury compressed into this single moment of clarity. I was 29 again, still married to Svetlana, still stupidly, blindly in love with a woman who saw me as nothing more than a stepping stone. The thing about being reborn is that you remember everything, every humiliation, every manipulation, every moment you told yourself it was love when it was really just exploitation. I remembered the first time Svetlana suggested it, her accent thicker when she wanted something. Darling, you know immigration lawyers say it would be faster if you became Canadian too. We could both be Canadian, start fresh together, no more worrying about my status. I remembered how reasonable it had sounded, how I'd believed her when she said it was about us building a life together, not about her using me as a ladder to climb into North America before kicking it away. I remembered signing the papers to renounce my U.S. citizenship, the way my hand had cramped halfway through from how tightly I'd been gripping the pen, some part of me screaming that this was wrong. But I'd ignored it because I loved her, because she'd cried and said she was scared of being deported, because I was an idiot who thought love meant sacrifice. 6 months after I became Canadian, Svetlana filed for divorce. 6 months after that, she was engaged to Marcus Wellington, whose family owned half of Manhattan real estate. Turned out she'd been sleeping with him for over a year, since before I'd renounced anything. She just needed me to get her permanent residency in Canada first, a backup plan while she worked on landing her billionaire. And she'd succeeded. By the time I died, Svetlana was living in a penthouse on Fifth Avenue, married to Marcus, with her American green card obtained through his sponsorship. She'd gotten everything she wanted. I'd spent 3 years fighting to get my American citizenship back, only to be denied again and again. Renunciation is meant to be permanent. The U.S. doesn't take kindly to people who abandon their citizenship and then want it back. I'd died stateless in spirit, my Canadian passport feeling like a mark of shame every time I looked at it. But now, I was back. Now I had a chance to stop it all from happening. The flight attendant appeared right on schedule. "Can I get you anything to drink?" "Vodka," they said. "Neat." She raised an eyebrow. I'd never been much of a drinker, but nodded. I needed it. My mind was racing through everything I knew, every detail of the next 5 years that I could use. The most important thing I knew was this: Svetlana's entire plan depended on a specific sequence of events. She needed to maintain her Canadian permanent residency while also securing her path to America. That meant she needed me compliant and useful for exactly as long as it took her to lock down Marcus, and not a moment longer. In my first life, I'd played my part perfectly. The devoted husband who'd do anything for his wife. The fool who'd believe her tears and her lies. This time would be different. This time, I knew her playbook. I knew that in 6 weeks, she'd accidentally run into Marcus at a charity gala that she'd spent 2 months engineering an invitation to. I knew that in 3 months, she'd start coming home later and later, claiming her modeling career was finally taking off. I knew that in 5 months, she'd start picking fights with me over nothing, building a paper trail of marital discord that her lawyer would use to paint me as the bad guy. I knew everything, and I was going to use it to destroy her. The apartment looked exactly as I remembered it. Our place in downtown Toronto, expensive because Svetlana insisted on the right address. I was paying for it with my salary from the tech startup, the job I'd eventually lose because I'd been too depressed to function after the divorce. Svetlana was in the kitchen when I walked in, her blonde hair perfect as always, her makeup flawless, even though it was just the two of us. She'd always been beautiful. That was part of how she'd gotten away with so much. "You're home early," she said, not looking up from her phone. "I thought your flight wasn't until later." "Changed it," I said, watching her carefully, looking for the signs I'd missed the first time. The way she angled her body away from me. The way her eyes never quite met mine unless she wanted something. The way her smile, when it came, never reached her eyes. How had I not seen it before? "There's leftover borscht in the fridge if you're hungry," she said absently. "I'm meeting Katya for drinks." Katya, her friend from the modeling agency, who was really just another social climber helping Svetlana network her way into circles where men like Marcus Wellington existed. "Actually, I need to talk to you about something," I said. That got her attention. She looked up and I saw the calculation in her eyes. What did I want? Was I going to be a problem? "What is it?" She set her phone down, giving me her full focus in that way she did when she needed to manage me. "The citizenship thing," I said. "I've been thinking about it." I watched her body language shift, becoming more open, more vulnerable. Here it came. The performance. "Oh, darling." She moved closer, her hand reaching for mine. "I know it's a big decision, but you know how scared I am about my status. If something happens with my PR application, I know," I interrupted Inoa, "and I want to help, but I've been doing research and I think there might be a better way." Her eyes narrowed slightly. This wasn't in her script. "What do you mean?" "Well, if you're really worried about your status, maybe we should focus on securing that first before I make any irreversible decisions about mine. I've been looking into it, and there are lawyers who specialize in expediting permanent residency applications. We could hire one of them, get your situation fully secure, and then I could make the decision about my citizenship from a less pressured place." It was perfect because it sounded reasonable, loving even, but it would throw off her entire timeline. Svetlana's face went through several micro-expressions before settling on a calculated version of disappointment. "But the lawyer we talked to said it would be faster if we were both Canadian, that it would show stability and commitment." "Which lawyer said that?" I asked. Because I've consulted with 3 different immigration attorneys this week, and none of them said anything like that. In fact, they said my citizenship status is completely irrelevant to your permanent residency application. I watched her scramble. She hadn't expected me to actually do research. In the first timeline, I'd just trusted her. "Well, maybe I misunderstood," she said carefully. "My English, sometimes these legal terms—" "Your English is perfect, Lana." I used her nickname, kept my voice gentle. "You understand legal documents better than most native speakers. So I'm just wondering where this information came from." She stared at me, and for just a moment I saw something cold flicker across her face before she hid it. "Are you saying you don't trust me?" "I'm saying I want to make sure we're making decisions based on accurate information," I replied. "This is my citizenship we're talking about. It's not something I can just undo if we make a mistake." Oh, the irony of those words now. "I see." She pulled her hand back, her voice cooling. "So you won't do this for me? After everything I've sacrificed to be with you?" And there it was, the guilt trip that had worked so perfectly the first time. "What have you sacrificed?" I asked quietly. She blinked. "Excuse me?" "I'm genuinely asking. What have you sacrificed for our relationship?" "I left my home country, my family, my career opportunities in Russia." "You left Russia because you wanted to," I said. "You've told me a dozen times how much you hated it there, how you wanted a better life. And you came here on a student visa that you applied for before we even met. As for your family, you haven't spoken to your mother in 3 years, and you told me yourself you were glad to get away from her." Her eyes were ice now. "So now you're throwing my difficult relationship with my mother in my face?" No, I'm just pointing out that you didn't sacrifice those things for me. You made choices for yourself, which is fine. But let's not pretend you gave up some perfect life to be with me. In my first life, this conversation would have ended with me apologizing, with me promising to think about the citizenship thing, with me eventually caving because I couldn't stand to see her upset. This time, I just waited. I can't believe you're being like this, she said finally. I thought you loved me. I do love you, I lied. That's why I want to make sure we're making the right decisions. If your permanent residency is really in jeopardy, then we should focus on that. I'll pay for the best immigration lawyer in Toronto. We'll get your status secured properly. And then, if you still think it makes sense for me to renounce my citizenship, we can revisit it. It was a perfect trap. If she pushed too hard for me to renounce immediately, it would expose that her urgency wasn't really about her immigration status at all. If she backed off, it gave me time to work on the next phase of my plan. She chose to back off. Fine, she said, her voice clipped. We'll do it your way. Hire a lawyer. But don't be surprised when they tell you the same thing I've been saying. I won't be, I said. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door and, I'm going out, don't wait up. The door slammed behind her, and I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Round 1 to me. The next few weeks fell into a familiar pattern, though I was experiencing it all through a different lens now. Svetlana went through the motions of being my wife, cooking occasionally, sleeping in the same bed, showing up to work events when required. But I could see the resentment building in her, the frustration that I wasn't rolling over the way I had before. I hired an immigration lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who took one look at Svetlana's file and confirmed what I already knew. Her permanent residency application is solid, Patricia said in her office, Svetlana sitting beside me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You've been married for 2 years. You have shared finances, shared residence. There's no reason to think it won't be approved. The processing time is the only issue, but that's standard. Usually takes about 6 months from this point. And there's nothing we can do to speed it up? Svetlana asked. Not really, Patricia said, unless you have some kind of emergency circumstances, but based on what you've told me, you don't. You're employed, you have stable housing, your current status allows you to work. There's no urgency from an immigration perspective. I watched Svetlana's jaw tighten. And just to be clear, I said, my citizenship status has no bearing on her application? Patricia looked confused by the question. No, none at all. Why would it? Just something we'd heard, I said. Wanted to confirm. After the meeting, in the car, Svetlana was silent. I could practically hear her recalculating. Well, that's good news, I said cheerfully. 6 months and you'll have your permanent residency, then you won't have to worry anymore. 6 months, she repeated flatly. 6 months that would push her timeline with Marcus dangerously close to when she'd need to show immigration that our marriage was still solid. She'd been planning to have her permanent residency approved, then immediately file for divorce and move on to Marcus. But if the approval took 6 months and she needed to stay married to me during that time, her whole plan was unraveling and she knew it. Are you okay? I asked, feigning concern. Fine, she bit out, just tired. That night, she made an excuse about needing to stay at Katya's place because they had an early morning casting call. I told her I understood. I understood perfectly. She needed time to think, to adjust her strategy, and I needed time to execute mine. The charity gala was in 4 weeks. I knew because I'd looked it up, the same one where Svetlana had accidentally met Marcus the first time. The Wellington Foundation annual fundraiser, tickets starting at $5,000 a plate, the kind of event where Manhattan elite mingled with Toronto's upper crust in a glittering display of wealth and philanthropy. In my first life, I'd never known how Svetlana had gotten an invitation. She'd told me she'd been invited through her modeling agency, that it was a networking opportunity. I'd been happy for her, even encouraged her to go, never suspecting she'd been angling for that invitation for months. This time, I knew exactly how she'd managed it. Katya's boyfriend, Dmitry, worked for an event planning company that had been hired to help coordinate the gala. He'd been able to slip Svetlana's name onto the guest list as a +1 for a photographer who didn't actually exist. It was the kind of small-scale fraud that no one would notice or care about in the chaos of a 500-person event, unless someone brought it to the right person's attention. I made a phone call. Wellington Foundation, how may I direct your call? I'd like to speak to someone about the annual fundraiser, I said, specifically about guest list security. They transferred me 3 times before I got someone who actually cared. A woman named Sandra, who was apparently in charge of event coordination and took the security of her guest list very seriously. What seems to be the problem? She asked crisply. I've become aware that someone is planning to attend your event using fraudulent credentials, I said. A woman named Svetlana Volkova. She's not actually invited, but she's been added to the list as a +1 for a photographer who doesn't exist. I thought you should know, given the caliber of your guests and the security concerns that come with an event like this. There was a pause. And how did you come by this information? The person who helped her add her name to the list told me about it, I said. He thought it was funny. I thought it was a security risk. These events attract high-profile individuals. You wouldn't want just anyone walking in. No, Sandra said slowly. We certainly wouldn't. Can you give me the details? I told her everything I knew. Dimitri's name, the event planning company, the fake photographer profile. I made it sound like I was a concerned citizen who'd stumbled onto something troubling, not a vengeful ex-husband-to-be destroying his wife's carefully laid plans. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Sandra said. We'll look into it immediately. I hung up, feeling satisfied. That took care of the gala. But I wasn't done. Not even close. The thing about Svetlana was that she'd always been smart about covering her tracks. In my first life, I'd never had proof of her affair with Marcus until after the divorce, when she was already engaged to him. She'd been careful, different phone for their communications, meeting him only in places where we had no mutual friends, building their relationship in the shadows while maintaining the facade with me. But I knew her patterns now. I knew she met Marcus for lunch every Thursday at a restaurant in Yorkville, claiming she had auditions or meetings with her agency. I knew she kept her second phone in a tampon box in the bathroom because she thought I'd never look there. I knew she told Marcus I was just a placeholder, a means to an end, that she'd leave me as soon as it was safe. And this time, I was going to use all of it. I started building my evidence file. I set up a camera in our bedroom, hidden in a smoke detector she'd never think to check. I installed tracking software on our shared laptop, the one she sometimes used when her phone wasn't convenient. I hired a private investigator, a discreet professional who asked no questions and delivered photographs. In my first life, Svetlana had painted me as the villain in our divorce. She'd claimed I was controlling, that I'd isolated her, that she feared for her safety. It was all lies, but her lawyer had coached her well, and I'd been too destroyed to fight back effectively. The divorce had gone through on her terms, and by the time I thought to gather evidence, it was too late. Not this time. This time, I was going to have a documentation of everything. Every lie, every affair, every manipulation. And when the time came to use it, I'd have exactly what I needed. 3 weeks after our meeting with Patricia, Svetlana came home in a mood. The gala invitation fell through, she said, throwing her purse on the couch. What gala? I asked innocently. The Wellington Foundation thing. Katya was supposed to get me in, but apparently there was some security issue with the list. They're being ridiculous about credentials now. That's too bad, I said, Inez. Were you looking forward to it? She shot me a look. It was a networking opportunity for my career. Right, I said, well, there'll be other events. She stalked off to the bedroom, and I heard her on the phone a few minutes later, her voice angry and rapid in Russian. I didn't speak Russian, but I didn't need to. I knew she was scrambling. Meeting Marcus at the gala had been her plan A. She'd need a plan B now. I wondered how long it would take her to come up with one. It took 2 weeks. I've been thinking, Svetlana said over dinner, her tone carefully casual. Maybe we should take a trip to New York. I have some modeling opportunities there, and it might be good for us to get away for a few days. There it was. If she couldn't meet Marcus at the gala in Toronto, she'd engineer a meeting in New York instead. New York? I asked. I don't know if I can get the time off work right now. Her expression tightened. It would just be a few days. Why don't you go yourself? I suggested. If it's for work, I don't want to be in the way. You should focus on your opportunities. I want you to come, she insisted. We could make it romantic. See a show, have nice dinners. When was the last time we did something like that? Because you're planning to meet your boyfriend and need me as cover, I thought. Let me check my schedule, I said. I had no intention of going to New York with her, but I didn't need to tell her that yet. The private investigator's report arrived the next week. Photographs of Svetlana meeting a man at various locations in Toronto, coffee shops, restaurants, hotel lobbies. The man was Marcus Wellington. I'd recognize him anywhere. Tall, classically handsome, with the kind of casual confidence that came from never having to worry about money. In one photo, they were standing close together outside a hotel, his hand on her waist. In another, they were in a car together, her hand on his knee. The timestamps showed these meetings had been happening for months, overlapping perfectly with her supposed auditions and networking events. I added the photos to my file. Svetlana's frustration was building. I could see it in the way she looked at me, the barely concealed contempt in her eyes. I was supposed to be easy. I was supposed to do what she wanted. In her mind, I was the boring tech guy who'd won the lottery by landing a woman like her, and I should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention she threw my way. But I wasn't playing along anymore, and it was driving her crazy. Did you ask about time off? She pressed one night. They said it's a bad time, I lied. We're in the middle of a product launch, maybe in a few months. A few months? Her voice rose. I told you this is time sensitive. The modeling opportunities won't wait. Then you should definitely go, I said. I don't want to hold you back. She stared at me, and I could see her weighing her options. If she went to New York alone, she could see Marcus freely, but it would look suspicious. If she pushed too hard for me to come, it would reveal how much she needed the cover of our marriage. Forget it, she finally said. I'll figure something else out. I knew what she'd figure out. She'd claim there was a family emergency. Her mother, who she supposedly hated but who was always useful as an excuse when needed. She'd say she had to go to Russia for a week and I'd offer to come with her, and she'd insist I shouldn't miss work. And then she'd go to New York instead. It played out exactly as I predicted. My mother is sick, she told me 2 days later, her eyes almost convincingly worried. I need to go home for a week, maybe 2. I'll come with you, I said immediately. No, she protested. You have work. And honestly, it would just be stressful. You know how my mother is. It's better if I handle this alone. Are you sure? I asked. I don't mind. I'm sure. She touched my arm, a rare gesture of physical affection. You're sweet to offer. But really, I'll be fine. I nodded. Okay. But let me know if you need anything. I can always fly out if things get worse. Thank you, darling. She booked a flight to Moscow for the following Tuesday. I knew because I saw the confirmation email on our shared laptop. What she didn't know was that I also saw the hotel reservation in Manhattan for the same dates. I called in sick to work on Tuesday and followed her to the airport. Not closely enough that she'd notice, but close enough to see which flight she actually boarded. Not the one to Moscow, the one to New York. I took a photo of her going through the gate for the New York flight, added it to my file, and went home. For the next week, I tracked her movements through the credit card we shared. Charges at expensive Manhattan restaurants, charges at hotels, charges at places that painted a very clear picture of someone on a romantic getaway, not visiting a sick mother. I documented everything. When she came home, she looked refreshed, happy in a way I hadn't seen her in months. How's your mother? I asked. Better, she said. False alarm mostly. You know how she exaggerates. I'm glad, I said. I was worried. She smiled at me and I smiled back, and we both played our parts. The private investigator's follow-up report included photos from New York. Svetlana and Marcus at a restaurant holding hands across the table. Svetlana and Marcus entering his apartment building. Svetlana and Marcus kissing on a street corner in Soho, thinking themselves anonymous in a city of millions. I looked at the photos and felt nothing. In my first life, evidence like this would have destroyed me. I'd loved her so much that her betrayal had felt like death, but I'd already lived through that death. I'd already experienced the worst of what she could do to me. Now I just felt cold, calculating satisfaction. The trap was almost ready. A month later, Patricia called with news. Svetlana's permanent residency has been approved, she said. Congratulations. She'll receive her official documentation in a few weeks, but she's now a permanent resident of Canada. That's wonderful, I said. Thank you for all your help. I hung up and looked at the calendar. In my first life, she'd filed for divorce exactly 3 weeks after her permanent residency was approved. She'd needed the buffer to make sure the approval was solid, that she couldn't be accused of marriage fraud. I wondered if she'd follow the same timeline this time. She did. We need to talk, Svetlana said 2.5 weeks later. We were in the living room. She'd made tea, which should have been my first clue that something was coming. She never made tea unless she was about to ask for something or tell me something I wouldn't like. What's going on, aside akuma? I asked. She took a breath, her expression carefully composed into something meant to resemble sadness. I don't think this is working anymore. What isn't working? Us. She gestured between us. Our marriage. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I just don't think we're right for each other. Where is this coming from? I asked, even though I knew exactly where it was coming from. Marcus had proposed. She'd told me about it while crying in our bed in my first life, claiming she hadn't meant to fall in love with someone else, that it just happened. I've been unhappy for a while, she said. I've tried to make it work, but I think we want different things. Such as? She blinked, clearly not expecting me to ask. Well, you're so focused on your career, and I need someone who's more present. I work 40 hours a week, I said, and I'm home every evening. How much more present do you need me to be? It's not just about time, she said, frustration creeping into her voice. It's about emotional connection. I don't feel like you see me. I see you, I said quietly. I see you very clearly. Something flickered in her expression. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. What does that mean? It means I know you've been unhappy, and if you want a divorce, I'm not going to fight you on it. She stared at me, clearly thrown. In her script, this was supposed to be a fight. I was supposed to beg her to stay, to promise to change, to make her feel powerful and desired. My easy acceptance wasn't part of her plan. You're not? She asked carefully. No, I said, if you're unhappy, then we should end this. I want you to be happy, Lana. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She didn't trust this. Just like that? You don't want to try counseling do you want to try counseling? I asked. No, I just thought you'd want to fight for us. I smiled. What would be the point? You've clearly made up your mind. And honestly, I think you're right. We do want different things. She was scrambling now, trying to regain control of the conversation. What do you want then? A fair divorce, I said. We split our assets equitably. We both move on with our lives. No drama, no drawn-out legal battles. Clean break. You're serious? Completely. I watched her trying to figure out the angle, the trap. But there wasn't one. Not yet. Okay, she said slowly. Then I guess we should each get lawyers and start the process. Agreed, I said. I'll find someone this week. She stood up, looking unsettled. I think I'll stay at Katya's tonight. Give us both some space. Good idea, I said. After she left, I poured myself a drink and looked out at the Toronto skyline. Phase 1 was complete. She had her permanent residency. She thought she was getting out clean. Now came Phase 2. making sure she lost everything. I hired a divorce lawyer named Thomas Brennan, a shark in a suit who'd built his reputation on winning ugly divorces for clients who had the money to pay for scorched earth. I want to be very clear about my goals, I told him in our first meeting. I don't want her to get away with anything. I want documentation of the adultery. I want her to walk away from this marriage with exactly what she brought into it, which is nothing. Thomas looked at the file I'd prepared, the photographs, the credit card statements, the flight records showing her lie about visiting her mother. This is very thorough, he said, impressed. Most clients come in with nothing but suspicions. I like to be prepared, I said. What's your timeline? She'll serve me with divorce papers in the next week, I said. She's going to claim irreconcilable differences, probably paint herself as the victim of a cold, emotionally unavailable husband. I need you to be ready to counterpunch immediately. Consider it done, Thomas said. With evidence like this, her lawyer won't know what hit them. Svetlana served me with divorce papers 8 days later. Her lawyer had drafted a petition that was almost funny in its fiction. According to the document, I was controlling, financially manipulative, and had created an environment where she felt unsafe and unsupported. It was exactly the narrative she'd used in my first life. Thomas filed our response 3 days later. Our counterclaim included adultery as grounds for divorce, supported by dozens of photographs, time-stamped evidence of her lies, and a detailed accounting of how she'd used marital funds to support her affair. Svetlana called me that night, her voice shaking with rage. What the fuck do you think you're doing? Filing an honest divorce petition, I said, calmly. Unlike yours. You had me followed, you invaded my privacy. I documented the truth, I said. If you didn't want evidence of your affair, you probably shouldn't have had one. This is bullshit, she yelled. You can't prove any of this. Actually, I can. That's kind of the point of evidence, but please feel free to deny it in court. I'm sure the judge will find your testimony very credible when compared to time-stamped photographs and credit card records. She was breathing hard. You're going to regret this. I don't think I will, I said. But you might, she hung up on me. The divorce proceedings became a war. Svetlana's lawyer tried every angle, claiming the evidence was obtained illegally. It wasn't. Claiming I'd doctored the photographs. I hadn't. Claiming her relationship with Marcus had started after our separation. The timestamps proved otherwise. None of it worked. Thomas was relentless. Every hearing, every deposition, he hammered home the same points. Svetlana had married me to secure her immigration status. She'd manipulated me into supporting her financially while she carried on an affair with a wealthy American. She'd lied about visiting her sick mother to spend a week with her lover in New York. She'd committed adultery repeatedly and systematically while living off my income. I watched her credibility disintegrate piece by piece. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Margaret Holloway, and she clearly had no patience for Svetlana's act. When Svetlana tried to cry on the stand about how I'd made her feel trapped in our marriage, Judge Holloway looked at her over her glasses and said, Ms. Volkova, crying may work on men who are romantically interested in you, but I am neither a man nor remotely charmed. Please answer the question. It was beautiful. In the end, the divorce was granted on my terms. No alimony. She got her personal belongings and her car, which she'd paid for with money I'd given her, but I was feeling generous. Everything else stayed with me, the apartment, the savings, the investments. She walked away with less than she'd come with because she'd been living off my money the whole time. But I wasn't done with her yet, not even close. The thing about Svetlana's affair with Marcus was that it was built on a foundation of lies. She'd told him she was in an unhappy marriage to a controlling man who wouldn't let her work or have her own life. She'd portrayed herself as a victim, trapped, and desperate for escape. Marcus, to his credit or his stupidity, had believed her. He'd probably seen himself as her rescuer, the knight in shining armor who'd save her from her terrible husband. But now the truth was a matter of public record. Court documents that detailed her lies, her manipulation, her calculated use of our marriage to secure her immigration status. Documents that showed she'd been the one using and deceiving, not the other way around. I made sure Marcus received my copies. I didn't send them directly, that would have been too obvious. Instead, I had them delivered to his office by accident, mixed in with some financial documents related to a charity his foundation was involved with. Just a clerical error, easy to dismiss. Except Marcus didn't dismiss them, he read them. I know because my private investigator, who I'd kept on retainer for exactly this purpose, reported that Marcus and Svetlana had a screaming fight outside his apartment building 3 days after the documents were delivered. The investigator couldn't hear what was said, but the body language was clear. Marcus was angry. Svetlana was defensive. It ended with him going inside alone and her standing on the sidewalk looking devastated. She called me that night. "You sent him the divorce documents." Her voice was flat. "I didn't send anyone anything," I said truthfully, "though I suppose they are public record. Anyone could access them." "You're destroying my life." "No," I said. "I'm just making sure the truth is known. If your life is being destroyed, that's because it was built on lies." "Marcus won't see me anymore," she said, and for the first time, I heard real desperation in her voice. "He thinks I used him." "Didn't you?" Silence. "You ruined everything," she whispered. "No, Lana, you ruined everything. I'm just making sure you don't get to walk away clean." She hung up. But here's the thing about men like Marcus Wellington. They don't stay single for long and they don't forgive being made to look foolish. Within a month, he was seen with a new woman, some socialite with an unimpeachable background and family connections that made Svetlana look like exactly what she was, an opportunistic outsider. And Svetlana? She was back in Toronto, her dreams of Manhattan penthouses shattered, her green card prospects gone, left with nothing but her Canadian permanent residency and a reputation in tatters. But I still wasn't done. The thing about immigration fraud is that it's taken very seriously. Marriage fraud specifically, marrying someone solely to obtain immigration benefits, can result in criminal charges, loss of immigration status, and deportation. And I had evidence of exactly that. I documented everything from the beginning. Her initial push for me to give up my citizenship before she'd even secured her own status. Her lies about the urgency of her immigration situation. Her affair that had started before she obtained permanent residency, proving the marriage had been a sham from the start. Most importantly, I had evidence of her coaching sessions with Katya, recorded on the laptop she'd sometimes used. Conversations where they explicitly discussed how to manipulate me into supporting her immigration, how to maintain the appearance of a real marriage just long enough to get her status approved, how to plan her exit strategy. All of it was documented. All of it was damning. I took my evidence file to a lawyer who specialized in immigration fraud cases. "This is extensive," he said, looking through the documents. "You're talking about potentially getting her permanent residency revoked." "That's exactly what I'm talking about," I said. "You understand that if we pursue this, she could face criminal charges, deportation?" "I understand perfectly." He studied me for a moment. "Most people wouldn't go this far." "Most people haven't been where I've been," I said. He nodded slowly. "I'll need to submit this to IRCC, Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. They'll investigate. It could take months." "I have time," I said. The investigation took 7 months. 7 months during which Svetlana tried to rebuild her life in Toronto. She got a job at a high-end restaurant, using her looks and her accent to charm wealthy patrons. She moved in with Katya. She posted carefully curated photos on social media, trying to project an image of someone who was doing just fine, thank you very much. But I could see the cracks, the way her smile didn't reach her eyes, the desperation in her posts about new beginnings and finding myself. She was drowning, and she knew it, and then IRCC came knocking. They interviewed her multiple times. They interviewed me. They reviewed all the evidence I'd provided. They dug into our marriage, our timeline, her relationship with Marcus, and they concluded what I'd already known. Svetlana Volkova had committed marriage fraud. The letter arrived at her address, Katya's apartment, on a Tuesday morning. I know because Katya called me, hysterical. "What did you do?" she screamed into the phone. "They're taking away her status. They're going to deport her." "I told the truth," I said. "That's all." She'll be sent back to Russia. Do you know what that means for her? I know exactly what it means, I said. It means she'll be exactly where she would have been if she'd never met me. Seems fair. Katya was still yelling when I hung up. Svetlana had 30 days to appeal the decision. She hired a lawyer, spent her last savings on legal fees, and tried to argue that the marriage had been real, that feelings had just changed over time, that this was all a vindictive ex-husband trying to hurt her. But the evidence was too strong. The timeline was too clear. The coaching sessions with Katya, recorded in her own voice, were impossible to explain away. Her appeal was denied. She had 60 days to leave Canada. She came to see me 3 weeks before her deportation date. I'd moved into a new apartment by then, a nicer place with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the water. The tech startup had been acquired and my shares had made me comfortable. Life was good. I almost didn't let her up, but curiosity won out. She looked terrible, thinner than I'd ever seen her, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. The polish was gone. She looked like what she was, a desperate woman who'd lost everything. Why? She asked as soon as I opened the door. Why did you do this to me? Come in, I said. She followed me into the living room, looking around at the space with something like bitterness in her eyes. Nice place, she said. You've done well for yourself. I have, I agreed. Turns out when you're not supporting a cheating spouse, you can save quite a bit of money. She flinched. I never meant to hurt you. Yes, you did, I said calmly. You meant to use me. You meant to manipulate me into giving up my citizenship. You meant to drain my finances while you fucked your way into a richer man's bed. The fact that you didn't care about hurting me doesn't mean you didn't mean to do it. I was desperate, she said. You don't know what it's like to be used, to be lied to have someone you love treat you like you're worthless. I laughed. Actually, I know exactly what that's like. You taught me. She sank onto my couch uninvited. Please, there has to be something you can do. Talk to immigration. Tell them you made a mistake, that you were angry. I'm not going to do that. Please. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I almost felt something. Almost. I can't go back to Russia. You don't understand. I have nothing there. No one. You should have thought of that before you decided to commit fraud. It wasn't fraud. I did love you at the beginning. Stop, I said. Don't insult both of us with that lie. You never loved me. You saw a tool and you used it. The only thing you're sorry about is that the tool fought back. She was crying now, real tears streaming down her face. What do you want from me? You want me to beg? Fine, I'm begging. Please don't let them deport me. I'm not letting them do anything, I said. You did this to yourself. Every choice, every lie, every manipulation, that was you. I'm just making sure you face the consequences of your choices. You're cruel, she whispered. No, I said. I'm just not your victim anymore. She left my apartment and I never saw her again. Svetlana Volkova was deported to Russia on a Tuesday in March. I didn't go to see her off. I didn't need to. I'd already won. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd tried to come back, applied for visitor visas, tourist permits, anything. All denied. Her fraud was on record now. Canada didn't want her. America certainly didn't want her. She was stuck in the country she'd spent years trying to escape. Sometimes I wondered what she told people. Whether she played the victim even there, whether she spun some story about an abusive ex-husband who'd ruined her life. Maybe she did. Maybe she believed it herself by now. I didn't care. 3 years after the deportation, I met someone new. Her name was Jennifer. She was a lawyer at a firm downtown, and she was everything Svetlana wasn't. Honest, independent, genuinely kind. We took things slow. I told her about my first marriage, about the fraud and the betrayal, and she listened without judgment. That must have been horrible, she said. It was, I agreed, Sas, but it taught me a lot. About people, about myself, about what I will and won't accept. No regrets? She asked. I thought about it. About the year I'd spent methodically destroying Svetlana's plans. About the satisfaction I'd felt when her permanent residency was revoked, about the coldness in my heart when she'd begged me for help and I'd refused. No regrets, I said. And I meant it, because in my first life, Svetlana had taken everything from me: my citizenship, my savings, my self-respect, my ability to trust. She'd used me up and thrown me away. And I died alone and broken because of it. But this time, I'd had the knowledge to fight back. This time, I'd made sure that the woman who'd tried to destroy me lost everything instead. They'd made me want to give up my citizenship for her green card, but after my rebirth, she got deported anyway, and I got my life back. I still think about her sometimes when I'm lying in bed next to Jennifer, listening to her breathe in the darkness. I wonder if Svetlana thinks about me too, if she lies awake in whatever life she's built in Russia and regrets her choices. Probably not. People like Svetlana don't really do regret. They just move on to the next mark, the next opportunity, the next person they can use. But that's not my problem anymore. I got a letter once, about 2 years after the deportation. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. It was just one sentence. I hope you're happy now. I burned it without responding. Because yes, Svetlana, I am happy now. Finally, genuinely, completely happy. And you're the reason why, just not in the way you ever intended. The universe gave me a second chance and I used it to make sure you never got one. Some people might call that cruel, vindictive, excessive. I call it justice. And I sleep just fine at night. Years later, Jennifer and I got married. Small ceremony, just close friends and family. My parents flew in from Florida, where they'd retired. Her sister was the maid of honor. It was simple and perfect and real. At the reception, my father pulled me aside. "I'm proud of you," he said. "You've built a good life. After everything you went through with that first marriage, I wasn't sure you'd be able to trust someone again." I wasn't sure either, I admitted. He squeezed my shoulder. "But you did. That takes strength." I nodded, thinking about the path that had led me here, the death that had given me a second chance, the knowledge that had let me protect myself, the choices I'd made to ensure I'd never be a victim again. "Dad," I said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." If someone hurt you badly, really badly, and you had the chance to make sure they faced consequences for it, would you? Even if it meant going further than most people would, he looked at me thoughtfully. "Is this about your ex-wife?" "Maybe." He was quiet for a moment. "You know, when you told me what she did, the fraud, the manipulation, all of it, I wanted to hurt her myself. Not physically, but I wanted her to suffer the way you suffered, the way I watched my son suffer." He paused. "Did you do something to her?" "I made sure the truth came out," I said carefully. "I made sure she couldn't get away with what she'd done." "Good," he said simply. "Some people think forgiveness means letting people walk all over you. But real strength is protecting yourself and making sure bad people don't get to keep being bad without consequences." I hugged my father, grateful for his understanding. Later that night, dancing with Jennifer, I felt a peace I'd never experienced in my first life. I'd been reborn with the knowledge to protect myself, and I'd used it. I'd dismantled every part of Svetlana's plan, exposed every lie, and ensured that she lost everything she'd schemed to gain. And now I had this, a real marriage, built on honesty and mutual respect. A wife who chose me because she loved me, not because she could use me. A future that was mine to build, not stolen away by someone else's greed. "What are you thinking about?" Jennifer asked, her head on my shoulder as we swayed to the music. "How lucky I am," I said. And it was true. I was lucky. Lucky to have been given a second chance. Lucky to have had the strength to use it. Lucky to have found someone who made me believe in love again. Svetlana had tried to take everything from me. Instead, she'd inadvertently given me the gift of clarity. The knowledge that I deserved better. The strength to fight for myself. And in the end, that was worth more than anything she could have taken. Sometimes I still get asked about that first marriage, usually by people who only know the broad strokes, that I was married young, that it ended badly, that my ex was deported for immigration fraud. "Do you ever feel bad about it?" someone asked me once at a dinner party. About her being sent back to Russia? Jennifer tensed beside me, protective. But I just smiled and said, "No, she made her choices. I just made sure she couldn't escape the consequences." Because that's the truth of it. I didn't destroy Svetlana's life. I just refused to let her build it on the ruins of mine. She thought I was weak, someone she could use and discard. She thought wrong, and that mistake cost her everything. In my first life, I died alone, broken by her betrayal, my citizenship gone, my trust shattered, my savings depleted. In this life, I'm surrounded by people who love me, with my citizenship intact, my finances secure, and my self-respect restored. The scales are balanced. Justice is served, and Svetlana Volkova, wherever she is, knows that she picked the wrong man to underestimate. Because I came back from death itself to make sure she lost. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. That's the thing about second chances. They're not just about redemption. Sometimes they're about retribution, and mine was both. I got my life back. She lost hers. And in the end, that's exactly how it should be. The woman who tried to steal my future ended up with no future at all, while I got everything I ever wanted. Funny how that works out. Or maybe not funny, maybe just fair, finally, perfectly, justly fair. And I can live with that. In fact, I'm living better than ever. Because the best revenge isn't just success, it's success built on the ashes of your enemy's defeat. And my success is burning bright.